Iran just released that video of its retaliatory strikes against the United States. Iran hit a U.S. airbase in Kuwait. Iran doing that in response to the U.S. striking near Bandar Abbas Airport by the Strait of Hormuz in Iran, each side accusing the other of ceasefire violations, although Donald Trump now has gone completely silent. Donald Trump has not posted or said anything. Basically, in the past 12 hours, his last post was of the reflecting pool. And while Donald Trump has gone utterly silent, other authoritarians are filling the void. North Korea's dictator Kim Jong-un made it very clear that there will be absolutely and forever no denuclearization. North Korea saying it will forever be a nuclear power, and it continues to brag and boast about its nuclear enrichment, which Donald Trump allowed to occur when Trump was sending love letters to Kim Jong-un. Now, as Donald Trump has gone silent, we see others in the Trump regime ostensibly working with him, manipulating the markets. Yet again, they rushed to Barack Ravid over at Axios, and this was the scoop this morning. So with all of these ceasefire violations, or we should just say a ceasefire really doesn't exist. Let's just call it out what it is. With the war raging on, with the American people suffering, and with lots of bad news coming in about the economy from the Trump regime this morning, Barack Ravid from Axios has a scoop. U.S. and Iran reach a deal. There's a peace deal, but need Trump's final approval. Two U.S. officials and a regional source involved in the mediation efforts told me. I wonder who told you, Barack Ravid. Was it Witkoff? Was it Kushner? Was it Trump? And then Scott Jennings, the MAGA sycophant who got destroyed on that CNN show by MeidasTouch host Adam Mockler. Jennings goes, looks like a huge win for President Trump and the U.S. Hearing from a senior administration official, this report is true, and U.S. appears to be getting everything we want. So what is it that we're getting? I mean, let's talk about details, because it seems that Iran will remain controlling the Strait of Hormuz, that all discussions about Iran's nuclear material will be deferred for 60 days, that the Strait of Hormuz, which was open before Trump and Netanyahu launched the catastrophic war, that the Strait of Hormuz would once again be open. So what's the big win here? Ravid's report says the U.S. and Iran have reached an agreement on a memorandum of understanding for a 60-day ceasefire extension and the launch of negotiations on Iran's nuclear program. But Trump has not yet given his final approval. Two senior U.S. officials and a regional source involved in the mediation told me, so the peace deal isn't a deal. It is a memorandum of understanding to begin negotiations on a deal that may address denuclearization of Iran, perhaps in 60 days. We did it, everybody. I mean, that, for real? I mean, do you think we're all that stupid? Ravid goes on to say, the president conveyed a message to mediators that he wants a few days to think about it before making a final decision. A final decision on what? Now, let's talk about why they're pushing this yet again today. Market manipulation, in my opinion, because the PCE inflation numbers, this is the key inflation metric that's used by the Fed to determine if they're going to raise or lower interest rates. The PCE inflation came in hot. This is not good, folks, but it's all in connection with the experiences that we know is happening in the economy right now. April PCE inflation, the Fed's preferred inflation measure, rises to 3.8%, the highest since May of 2023. After Biden left, that was heading down. Biden was going to hand and had handed Donald Trump a situation where PCE inflation would have been at like 2% 6 months ago, but Trump had to do his tariffs against the world, launched this catastrophic war, which closed the Strait of Hormuz with Netanyahu. Also, core PCE inflation rises to 3.3%, the highest since October 2023. The Fed's top inflation metric is nearly double their target. Inflation is back in full swing. As our editor-in-chief Ron Filipkowski writes, this is why Republicans are working so hard to distract people with nonsense like whether Tallarico is a vegan and calling him Talafrico. They have nothing else to sell other than new wars, a slush fund for criminals, a ballroom, and a lousy economy. Also, when you dig deeper into these numbers, it gets worse than just that top-line inflation number. Personal savings right now, April 2026, is about 2.6%, whereas the personal savings rate, let's just say a year ago, April 2025, as Heather Long points out, was 5.5%. That's a sharp plunge, and it underscores how squeezed Americans are right now with higher prices and incomes not keeping up. Maybe you can explain some of this away by baby boomers retiring, but not all of this. And that personal savings rate dropping to 2.6%, that's the lowest since June of 2022. Also, as Heather Long, economist, says, keep an eye on this. 50% of items from that inflation data are growing at 3% or higher right now. And it's a telling metric. It underscores that this is more than just an energy shock. The inflation problem is deeper and wider than that. So with this terrible economic news coming out, juice the markets and say we've got a deal. This has been the playbook now since really the war began. And this has been Donald Trump's playbook of fraud, of criminality, of corruption his entire life. Then comes Israel's state regime media, and here's what they say. An Israel official briefing local media said that the Ayatollah Mojtaba Khomeini has not approved the proposed agreement, and therefore Trump has not approved it either. The Israelis are now speaking on behalf of Donald Trump, apparently. The official said that MB Ghalibaf and Aragchi lack final authority, even if they accept the framework, and that the supreme leader makes the decision. Israel has not been informed that either side approved the deal, and disputes remain according to its last update. Israel now, I guess, the official spokespeople for Donald Trump right there. Then Israel's Channel 14 says, as far as we know, the agreement has not been approved by President Trump nor Mojtaba Khomeini. Then Netanyahu held a press appearance where he said, Israel now controls 60% of the Gaza Strip. We want 70% of it. Netanyahu says, my directive is 70%. We'll start with that, he said at a conference in the Jordan Valley. And then some people in the crowd were said, 100, do 100%. Then regarding Lebanon, Netanyahu said, we are striking them and will strike them very hard. We know that the struggle continues. Therefore, it has no end unless you surrender. And Iran has made it very clear that any deal must have permanent security guarantees, not just for Iran, but for Lebanon as well. And knowing that, Israel has escalated its attacks on Lebanon in Beirut, destroying city blocks, demolishing complete cities there. And we've been covering that here on the MeidasTouch network. Donald Trump, while being completely outmaneuvered in the world, wants to continue to project strength in the Western Hemisphere. So, on the one hand, Trump regime officials go to Axios to talk about deal, to negotiate a deal, in the future about negotiating a deal. And then they run to Axios to plant this story. The Trump administration is bracing for the potential collapse of Cuba's totalitarian government as early as this summer and has war-gamed new military response plans in case the island descends into chaos, U.S. officials tell Axios. Do you see the playbook right here? Do you see how Axios is being utilized in Iran on a not just daily basis, but hourly basis? Do you see how it's now being utilized in Cuba? Put out all of this information, funnel it through Axios, use the propaganda as a tool to create confusion, and try to induce surrender through the sheer volume of the propaganda while having your aircraft carriers positioned nearby. That, I think, in my opinion, is the goal of all of this. We then also learned that the U.S. has now coerced Guatemala, following Ecuador, to allow joint U.S. military strikes on what the Trump regime deems to be drug trafficking groups inside its borders. We know that Trump regime strikes in many countries where they've said there are drug traffickers have actually not been drug traffickers. And basically, this is part of the U.S. plan to have their military engage in war everywhere in the Western Hemisphere. This is an arrangement currently taking place in Ecuador. I'm sure you know this from watching the MeidasTouch network. The U.S. has troops fighting like wars, like killing people in Ecuador. You know that the U.S. is engaged in all of these war crimes in Venezuela and off the coast of Venezuela, destroying those fishing boats. The U.S. continues to destroy those fishing boats in the Pacific as well. The U.S. has slaughtered about 200 people without due process at all, while the United States military, CENTCOM and SOUTHCOM, show videos of the war crimes taking place. And the New York Times is reporting that the broader goal seems to be the United States encircling Mexico with the military to try to make Mexico submit to American military dominance. And Donald Trump wants to invade Mexico, in my opinion, not necessarily a full-fledged invasion like Iran, but to invade with the use of troops and put troops all throughout Mexico and basically claim Mexico as a part, and parcel of Trump's imperialistic Western Hemisphere strategy. Maria Habib explains, under pressure, Guatemala secretly agreed to U.S. airstrikes in its borders against groups. More countries will be pressed soon. The bigger strategy here, normalize the presence of U.S. troops, of course, across Latin America, then get Mexico to accept a massive deployment of U.S. troops in Mexico. It didn't work in Canada. Trump's still pushing to do this in Mexico. We heard this morning as well from Iran's supreme leader, though, Mojtaba Khomeini. There was a statement while Donald Trump went silent. This is what Khomeini said: the enemy's blind plan after the imposed war, economic pressure and propaganda siege, is to create division and social fragmentation to compensate for its military defeats and bring the nation to its knees. So you have the Ayatollah saying, look, even if we, in my view, even if we do this deal, the goal is going to be then massive coercion, massive propaganda campaigns in order to try to tear the country apart and achieve that which the U.S. cannot do in the war. And I think what Iran realizes is that Donald Trump is not a good faith negotiator. As I've said before, Trump's a sucker puncher, which is kind of the worst type of scum in a negotiation or in anything. When your back is turned, you get punched in the back of your head, basically. That's what Trump does. He lures you in with negotiations. And if you notice, that's when he strikes. Back last June, that's when he attacked Iran when there was basically a deal in principle. In February, he attacked when there was a deal in principle. So he'll make up fake deals, and then he'll utilize the good faith that normally exists in human behavior of deals to exploit you. That's Donald Trump's MO his entire life. When people stand up to Trump, he loses. When you allow those tactics to capture you, you lose. And with all of this distraction taking place, what's going on behind the scenes here, or I should say, pretty much in front of the scenes, the rampant Trump corruption. So while the American people are suffering, can't afford groceries or gas or frankly anything or rent, and people are dipping into their savings and their 401ks to barely make it if they can make it at all, Trump administration put these appointees in place to press the Bureau of Engravings and Printing to design a proposed $250 bill featuring Trump's portrait and signature. The Washington Post reports, federal law currently allows only deceased people to appear on U.S. currency, and a $250 denomination, which doesn't exist, which is what Trump wants to have his face on because it's bigger than 100, would require congressional approval. So with surging inflation, let's just print more money. And let's make a $250 bill with Trump's face on it. That'll solve it. The bureau director who said, I ain't doing this, was retaliated against and moved to another division and essentially demoted. More rampant corruption being reported today. ProPublica, they're great. Here's what they uncovered. A top White House aide intervened to get a $620 million Pentagon loan for a company tied to Donald Trump Jr. The call came from the White House. We have to get this done. And so a company that I think had a valuation of around $200 million, this small North Carolina startup, all of a sudden had a valuation in the billions and billions of dollars after getting this loan, as the Trump crime family, as I call them, because in my opinion, that's what they are making billions and billions and billions of dollars. Trump is also stealing your entry fees to national parks. It wasn't bad enough that he put his face on the national park tickets, but now we also learn from this New York Times report that the administration is spending at least $60 million worth of fees paid by we the people for visiting national parks to do things like the reflecting pool and the fountains and all of Donald Trump's grotesquification of Washington, D.C. We covered a lot. There's a lot more to cover. This is what's going on this morning. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 7 million subscribers. Thanks for watching.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.